Why are you here? Victoria Langley's voice rang out through the clinking of glasses in the posh Manhattan restaurant, her disdainful gaze focused on Cassandra Brooks. The black CEO sat upright at the center table, her pastel pink dress shimmering. Victoria, sharp and elegant in silver silk, raised a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and poured it over Cassandra's head. The wine poured down in a torrent, soaking her hair, running down her face, soaking her dress. Gasps rang out. Phones flashed, recording the cruelty. Cassandra's silence was thunderous, her eyes unwavering. Would she collapse or rise? Could one topple an empire? The crowd held its breath, sensing a storm was brewing. Watch. Her next move would shatter all expectations. The air in the restaurant hung heavy, thick with the scent of truffle oil and the sharp tang of Sauvignon Blanc, still dripping from Cassandra Brooks's hair. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Le Ciel Étoilé, a haven for the city's elite where power was brokered over plates of caviar and gold-flecked desserts. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across sleek black tables, their surfaces reflecting the stunned faces of tech moguls, investors, and influencers gathered for the Novatech Gala's exclusive dinner. The clatter of silverware had ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it seemed to pulse. Every eye fixed on the central table where Cassandra sat, her pastel pink A-line gown, once a vision of delicate tulle and 3D floral accents, now clung wetly to her shoulders, the wine stain blooming like a bruise across the fabric. Victoria Langley leaned back in her chair, her silver silk dress catching the light like a blade. Her lips curled into a triumphant smirk, the empty wine glass dangling from her manicured fingers. "Look at her," she said, her voice a venomous purr that carried across the room, "dressed up like she belongs, but dripping like a street rat." A few sycophants at nearby tables chuckled, their laughter sharp and forced, eager to align with the CEO of Langley Ventures. But the room's energy wavered, the crowd's earlier gasps giving way to uneasy murmurs. Cassandra's hands rested lightly on the table, fingers interlaced, unmoving despite the wine trickling down her neck. Her stillness was unnerving, a stark contrast to the chaos Victoria had unleashed. Her dark eyes, framed by lashes heavy with moisture, locked onto her tormentor with a gaze that didn't waver, not in anger, not in shame, but in a quiet, searing calculation. The room seemed to tilt toward her, the chandelier's light bending as if drawn to her presence. She didn't wipe the wine from her face. She didn't flinch. And in that absence of reaction, she commanded the space more fiercely than Victoria's theatrics ever could. Liam, a young tech journalist with a shock of unruly curls, stood near the bar, his phone still raised but his thumb hesitating over the record button. His brow furrowed, a flicker of guilt crossing his face as he lowered the device slightly. "This isn't right," he muttered to a colleague, barely audible over the hum of whispers. "She's not breaking." Across the table, a venture capitalist in a tailored navy suit leaned toward his partner, his voice low. "That's Cassandra Brooks, isn't it? The one who closed the $2 billion deal with Langley's firm?" His partner nodded, eyes narrowing. Victoria just lit a fuse. The crowd was a mosaic of reactions. A young influencer in a sequined dress angled her phone for a better shot, her lips parted in a mix of thrill and discomfort. "This is going viral," she whispered, already crafting captions in her mind. But an older woman, a board member of a rival firm, clutched her pearl necklace, her face tight with disapproval. "This is beneath us," she said, her voice cutting through the giggles of Victoria's allies. The room's mood was fracturing. Some relished the spectacle, others sensed a reckoning brewing beneath Cassandra's silence. Victoria, oblivious to the shifting tide, tossed her blonde hair and laughed again, a high, brittle sound that grated against the quiet. "What's the matter, darling?" she taunted, leaning forward so her perfume, a cloying mix of jasmine and arrogance, warred with the sour wine. "No words? Did the wine wash away your courage?" She turned to the crowd, arms wide, as if conducting an orchestra of derision. "Come on, give her a round of applause for trying." A smattering of claps followed, but they were weak, hesitant, like raindrops before a storm. Cassandra's lips remained closed, but her mind was a furnace of clarity. "She thinks this is power," she thought, her pulse steady despite the humiliation. a glass of wine and a cheap laugh. But power isn't loud. It's what comes next. Her gaze never left Victoria, each second of silence building a pressure that made the air feel brittle. The influencer lowered her phone, her excitement curdling into unease. Liam slipped his device into his pocket, his jaw tight. "She's not the one who looks weak," he whispered, earning a nod from his colleague. At a corner table, a grizzled investor checked his phone, his fingers scrolling through market alerts. "That deal's still fresh," he murmured, his voice tinged with dread. "If Brooks pulls out—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes darted to Cassandra, who sat like a statue carved from defiance. The wine stains on her gown, meant to mark her as an outsider, began to look like battle scars. The floral accents, sagging under the weight of the liquid, caught the light in a way that made her seem almost luminous. Victoria's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, as she sensed the room slipping from her grasp. She forced another laugh, twirling her empty glass. "Don't be shy," she said, her voice pitching higher. "Show us that backbone you're so proud of." But the crowd's eyes were no longer on her. They were on Cassandra, on the woman who refused to break, whose silence was louder than any shout. The chandeliers above seemed to dim, their light pooling around the figure in the stained pink gown. Something was coming, something unstoppable, and every soul in that room felt it, whether they dared to admit it or not. The silence in Le Ciel Étoilé was a living thing, coiling around the black lacquered tables, tightening the air until it seemed the chandeliers might shatter under its weight. Cassandra Brooks sat at the heart of it, her pastel pink gown sodden, the wine's sticky trails glistening on her skin like veins of defiance. Her hands remained folded, her gaze a steady blade pinned on Victoria Langley, who stood frozen mid-gesture, her empty glass trembling slightly in her grip. The crowd, a constellation of wealth and ambition, leaned forward, their earlier laughter now a fading echo. The room was no longer Victoria's stage. It was bending to the will of the woman she'd tried to break. Victoria's silver silk dress shimmered as she shifted, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "What's this?" she said, forcing a laugh that splintered at the edges. "No fight left in you, Cassandra? Did that little bath wash away your spine?" Her voice was loud, meant to rally the room, but it landed like a misfired arrow. A few of her allies, sleek-suited executives with stakes in Langley Ventures, offered half-hearted chuckles, their eyes darting nervously. The influencer in sequins, her phone still raised, hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen as if questioning her role in this cruelty. The tide was turning, and Victoria could feel it, though she refused to admit it. Cassandra's silence deepened, a void that swallowed Victoria's taunts. Her thoughts were a steel trap. She thinks she's won, but she's only digging her grave. The wine dripped from her chin, pooling on the tablecloth, each drop a quiet metronome counting down to something inevitable. Her stillness wasn't surrender. It was a chess move, calculated and lethal. The crowd sensed it, their whispers growing sharper, more urgent. "She's not moving," a young coder in a velvet blazer muttered, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and unease. "That's not weakness," his companion replied, scrolling through market alerts on her phone. "That's control." Liam, the tech journalist, stood rooted near the bar, his notebook now open, pen scratching furiously. "She's rewriting the room," he whispered to his colleague, a grizzled editor with a skeptical frown. "Look at their faces. They're scared of her." He gestured subtly to a table of investors, their heads bent over glowing screens, fingers tapping anxiously. One, a silver-haired mogul with a fortune tied to Langley Ventures, leaned toward his partner. "That $2 billion contract," he said, voice low. "It's in her hands. If she pulls it—" His words trailed off, his face paling as he glanced at Cassandra, whose composure seemed to mock the room's fragility. Victoria tossed her blonde hair, her smile stretched thin, a mask of bravado. "Come on, darling," she said, stepping closer, her perfume cutting through the sour wine scent. "Give us a show. Prove you belong at this table." She waved her glass toward the crowd, expecting a surge of support, but the applause was sparse, a hollow patter. A woman in a sapphire gown lowered her phone, her lips pressed tight, as if ashamed of her earlier eagerness to record. Another guest, a tech founder with a penchant for drama, leaned back, his smirk fading. "This isn't fun anymore," he muttered, his eyes flicking to Cassandra's unflinching face. The chandeliers cast fractured light across the room, but it was Cassandra who seemed to draw it all, her stained gown glowing like a warrior's banner. Her silence was a mirror, reflecting the crowd's cruelty at them, forcing them to see their own complicity. A young woman at a nearby table, an up-and-coming app developer, whispered to her friend, "She's not the one who looks small." Her friend nodded, her phone now dark, its camera forgotten. The hashtag Chernobyl scandal was climbing on X, with posts shifting from mockery to speculation. "Is Cassandra Brooks about to burn it all down?" one influencer tweeted, the words flashing across screens in the room. Victoria's confidence cracked further, her movements jerky as she paced a small circle. "You're out of your depth," she snapped, her voice pitching higher, betraying a flicker of panic. "This world chews up pretenders like you." But her words rang hollow, drowned by the weight of Cassandra's presence. The black CEO's eyes never wavered, each second of her silence carving deeper into Victoria's facade. The crowd's murmurs grew bolder, a low hum of dissent. "She's the one who signed the deal," a venture capitalist whispered, his voice tight with realization. "Langley's playing with fire." Cassandra's fingers twitched, the slightest movement, as if testing the air. Let her talk, she thought. Every word is another nail in her coffin. The wine stains on her gown, once a mark of shame, now seemed to pulse with purpose, each droplet a testament to her restraint. Liam's pen paused, his eyes locked on her. "She's waiting," he said softly, his editor nodding slowly. "For what?" the editor asked, but Liam only shook his head, sensing the answer was coming, and it would be seismic. The room's energy was electric, every glance, every whisper charged with anticipation. Victoria's laughter tried to rise again, but it was a desperate, brittle sound, like glass on the verge of shattering. She spun toward the crowd, arms outstretched. "Don't tell me you're falling for this act," she cried, but her eyes betrayed her, darting back to Cassandra, searching for a crack that wasn't there. The silence grew heavier, the chandelier's light dimming in comparison to the woman at the center of the storm. Whatever came next, it would not be Victoria's victory. The crowd knew it, and so did she, though she clung to her arrogance like a drowning woman to a raft. Victoria Langley's brittle laughter echoed off the marble floors of Le Ciel Étoilé, a desperate bid to reclaim the room that was slipping through her fingers like sand. Her silver silk dress caught the chandelier's fractured light, but it no longer commanded attention. The glow seemed to favor the figure opposite her, where Cassandra Brooks sat, her pastel pink gown a sodden testament to unyielding resolve. The wine's sticky residue gleamed on her skin, but her posture remained impeccable, a statue of composure amid the storm. The crowd's murmurs had evolved into a low buzz, their phones now capturing not just the spectacle, but the subtle power shift. Victoria's eyes darted, her grip on the empty glass tightening until her knuckles whitened. "You're finished," she hissed, leaning in closer, her breath hot with fury. "This city will forget you by morning." Cassandra's silence stretched on, a vast ocean that drowned Victoria's words. Her thoughts were razor sharp. She sees cracks in her empire, but she doesn't know the earthquake is coming. The black CEO's fingers remained interlaced, her dark eyes unblinking, each moment amplifying the pressure. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if her stillness was drawing everything inward. A young coder at a side table pocketed his phone, his face flushed. "She's turning this around," he whispered to his companion, who nodded, her eyes wide. Without a word. How? The influencer in sequence, her live stream still running, hesitated, her commentary trailing off as the chat flooded with questions. Why isn't she reacting? Is this a setup? Liam, the tech journalist, leaned against the bar, his notebook filled with frantic scribbles. "It's like she's waiting for the perfect strike," he said to his editor, who rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And Victoria's handing her the weapon." Nearby, the venture capitalist with the $2 billion stake scrolled through his app, his face draining of color as he monitored Langley Ventures' real-time valuation. "This is bad," he muttered, his partner glancing at Cassandra with newfound respect. If she walks that deal, we're all in freefall. The whispers spread like ripples, touching every corner of the restaurant, from the tables laden with untouched foie gras to the bar where bartenders paused mid-pour, their eyes glued to the drama. Victoria paced now, her heels echoing like gunshots in the hushed space. "Admit it," she demanded, her voice cracking at the edges. "You don't belong here. You're an imposter in a pretty dress." She gestured wildly at the crowd, her arms sweeping across the room. "Tell her, everyone, she's nothing." But the response was a scattering of awkward coughs, a few averted gazes. A woman in a sapphire gown, who had been filming moments ago, turned her phone face down, her lips pursed in disapproval. "This is ugly," she said to her tablemate, a tech founder whose smirk had vanished. "And pointless. She's the one holding the cards." The chandelier's prismatic light danced across Cassandra's stained gown, making the floral accents sparkle despite the ruin. Her silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, a chambered round ready to fire. The crowd felt it, their bodies leaning in unconsciously, drawn to the gravity of her presence. A female director from a rival firm whispered to her husband, "Look at her eyes. She's not broken. She's unbreakable." Her husband nodded, his phone buzzing with alerts from market watchers. The hashtag Chalk Novatech scandal was exploding on X, posts shifting from sensational clips to debates. Victoria crossed a line. Cassandra's silence is screaming. Victoria's facade crumbled further, her movements frantic as she circled the table like a predator sensing weakness in itself. "Say something," she snapped, slamming her palm on the table, rattling the crystal stemware. "Or are you too scared?" Her perfume hung heavy, clashing with the wine's sour notes, but it couldn't mask the fear creeping into her tone. The room's energy pulsed, every guest hanging on the edge of what Cassandra might do next. The young app developer at the corner table tweeted under the table, "Cassandra Brooks is a force. Don't underestimate her. Rerasa Novatech scandal." Likes poured in, the digital wave mirroring the physical one in the restaurant. Cassandra's lips parted ever so slightly, not in speech, but in a measured breath that seemed to still the air. Let her unravel, she thought. Her arrogance is my ally. The wine stains on her gown, once a symbol of humiliation, now appeared almost deliberate, like war paint on a queen ready for battle. Liam's pen flew across his notebook, capturing the moment. "This is history," he breathed, his editor agreeing with a grunt. The grizzled investor pocketed his phone, his decision made. "I'm pulling my funds from Langley," he whispered, his voice carrying just far enough to reach Victoria's ears. Victoria froze, her face paling as the words hit her. "You wouldn't," she said, her voice a whisper now, the bravado evaporating. But the investor met her gaze steadily. "I just did." The room erupted into a cascade of murmurs, phones buzzing with notifications as the scandal spread beyond the walls of Le Ciel Étoilé. Cassandra's silence had become a roar, echoing through the crowd, the city, and soon, the world. Victoria's empire teetered, her silver dress no longer a shield but a shroud. The chandeliers dimmed in her mind, the light fully on the woman she had underestimated. Whatever Cassandra did next would seal the fate of them all. The buzz in Le Ciel Étoilé had sharpened into a current, electric and unforgiving, as if the very air anticipated a fracture. Cassandra Brooks sat at the center, her pastel pink gown a sodden banner, its wine-stained tulle clinging to her like a second skin, the floral accents glistening defiantly under the chandelier's glow. Her silence, once a shield, now felt like a drawn bow, taut and ready to release. Victoria Langley stood across from her silver silk dress dimmed by the spotlight that had shifted irrevocably. Her hand clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles pale, her earlier bravado reduced to a trembling sneer. The crowd, a tapestry of wealth and ambition, held its breath, their phones still raised but now capturing something far greater than scandal. A reckoning. Victoria's voice cracked as she tried again, her words a desperate lunge to reclaim her stage. "You're nothing," she spat, leaning forward, her blonde hair falling in disarray. "A nobody in a ruined dress, thinking you can sit with giants." Her laugh was shrill, a jagged edge that cut only herself. The room's response was a hollow silence, punctuated by the faint hum of notifications as Yaksharin Novatech scandal surged on X. A young coder at a side table whispered, "She's done," his voice carrying a mix of awe and finality. His companion, a female developer, nodded, her eyes locked on Cassandra. "And Brooks hasn't even spoken yet." Cassandra's lips parted, and the room seemed to lean closer, the chandelier's light pooling around her like a halo. Her thoughts were a furnace. She's built her throne on sand, and I'm the tide. Slowly, deliberately, she unfolded her hands, placing them flat on the table, the wine-soaked fabric of her gown rustling faintly. "You think this is power?" she said, her voice low, clear, cutting through the air like a blade. "Pouring wine? Throwing insults? That's just noise." Each word landed with the weight of iron, and the crowd exhaled sharply, as if released from a spell. Victoria flinched, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before narrowing in defiance. Liam, the tech journalist, froze mid-scribble, his pen hovering over his notebook. "That's it," he breathed to his editor, who leaned forward, eyes glinting with anticipation. "She's turning the tables." At a nearby table, the grizzled investor who had defected from Langley Ventures checked his phone again, his face grim as market alerts flashed red. "She's not just talking," he muttered to his partner. "She's warning." The woman in the sapphire gown, her phone now forgotten, leaned toward her table-mate. "That voice. It's like she owns the room." Her words were echoed on X, where a tech influencer tweeted, "Cassandra Brooks just spoke, and it's game over for Victoria. Your Novatech scandal." Victoria staggered back, her heels scraping the marble floor. "Don't lecture me," she snapped, but her voice wavered, thin and brittle against Cassandra's steel. "You're a fraud, and everyone here knows it." She gestured wildly at the crowd, seeking allies, but their faces were stone. The influencer in sequins lowered her phone, her live stream abandoned, her expression shifting from thrill to unease. A venture capitalist at the far end whispered, "That $2 billion deal, it's her call. Langley's finished if she pulls it." His partner nodded, eyes darting to Cassandra, whose stained gown now seemed less a mark of shame and more a crown of resolve. Cassandra's gaze never faltered, her eyes pinning Victoria like a specimen under glass. "Every word she speaks is a shovel, digging deeper," she thought. She reached for her napkin, dabbing a single drop of wine from her chin, with a grace that silenced the room further. The gesture was small but seismic, a declaration of control that made Victoria's theatrics seem childish. "Noise doesn't win wars," Cassandra continued, her voice steady, each syllable a stone dropped into still water. "Consequences do." The crowd gasped softly, phones capturing every word. The hashtag Walker Novatech scandal now flooded with posts. "Brooks is a queen. Langley's crumbling." Victoria's face flushed a blotchy red, her silver dress clinging to her like a lie exposed. "You can't scare me," she said, but her voice trembled, her hands shaking as she gripped the table. "This city is mine." The claim rang hollow, swallowed by the murmurs rippling through the restaurant. A female director whispered to her husband, "She's not just fighting back, she's rewriting the rules." Liam scribbled faster, his notebook filling with quotes. "This is bigger than a scandal," he said to his editor. "It's a shift." The editor nodded, his eyes on Cassandra, whose presence seemed to bend the room's gravity. The chandeliers flickered, or perhaps it was the crowd's perception, as Cassandra's words settled like dust after an explosion. Victoria tried to laugh, a forced high-pitched sound, but it died in her throat. Her allies, once quick to clap, now sat rigid, their phones buzzing with market alerts. The young coder tweeted, "Cassandra Brooks didn't raise her voice, but she's shaking the city. Sure Novatech scandal." The room's energy was a live wire, every glance, every whisper charged with the certainty that Cassandra held the match. Victoria's empire was cracking, and the woman in the stained pink gown was about to set it ablaze. The air in Le Ciel Étoilé crackled with a tension so sharp it seemed the crystal stemware might splinter. Cassandra Brooks sat at the heart of the storm, her pastel pink gown a stained banner of defiance, its tulle and floral accents gleaming like armor under the chandelier's fractured light. Her words, "Consequences do," still hung in the air, a guillotine poised above Victoria Langley's crumbling throne. Victoria stood trembling, her silver silk dress no longer a symbol of power, but a shroud clinging to a faltering frame. Her eyes darted wildly, seeking allies in a crowd that had turned against her, their phones now capturing not her triumph, but her unraveling. The restaurant's opulent hush was shattered by the buzz of notifications, as Washington's Novatech scandal burned through the digital ether. Cassandra's thoughts were a cold forge. She built her empire on arrogance. I'll end it with a single choice. Her fingers, steady despite the wine's sticky residue, reached for her phone, its sleek surface glinting in her palm. With deliberate precision, she tapped out a message, each keystroke a hammer strike against Victoria's legacy. She pressed send, then set the phone down with a soft, deliberate click that echoed like a thunderclap. The room froze, as if the marble floor itself held its breath. Victoria's sneer twisted into confusion, her voice a strained whisper. "What was that?" she demanded, but the quaver in her tone betrayed her dread. Liam, the tech journalist, leaned forward from the bar, his notebook nearly slipping from his hands. "She did something?" he hissed to his editor, who squinted at the crowd's sudden stir. Phones lit up like fireflies, screens flashing with breaking news alerts. Langley Ventures loses 2B contract. The grizzled investor at the corner table gasped, his device trembling as he read the headline aloud. "She canceled it," he said, his voice raw with shock. $2 billion, gone. His partner, a venture capitalist with a fortune at stake, barked into his phone. "Sell everything, now!" The murmurs exploded into a frenzy, guests exchanging frantic glances as the market reeled. Victoria staggered, her heels catching on the marble, her silver dress flashing like a dying star. "You're bluffing," she spat, but her eyes betrayed her, wide with a fear she could no longer mask. "You can't just undo a deal like that." Her voice rose to a shriek, but it was swallowed by the cacophony of notifications. A young coder tweeted from his table. Cassandra Brooks just erased $2 with one text. Legend, Doused Novatech scandal. The hashtag surge, post flooding X. Langley's done. Brooks is unstoppable. An influencer in sequins, her live stream abandoned, stared at Cassandra, whispering, she didn't even raise her voice. Cassandra's gaze remained fixed on Victoria, calm and unyielding, a predator watching prey unravel. She thought she could break me, she thought, but I break empires. She leaned back slightly, her posture regal, the wine stains on her gown now a badge of victory. The crowd's energy shifted fully to her, their phones no longer mocking but reverent, capturing the moment a titan was born. A female director in a sapphire gown murmured to her husband, "That's power, real power." Her husband nodded, his eyes wide. "And she's rewriting the game." The chandelier's light seemed to bend around Cassandra, casting her in a glow that dwarfed Victoria's fading presence. The room's chaos, whispers, buzzing phones, the clink of untouched glasses, only amplified her stillness. Liam scribbled furiously, his pen racing to capture her aura. "She's a force," he said to his editor, who grunted in agreement. "This is bigger than tonight." At a nearby table, a tech founder whispered, "Langley's stock is tanking. Check the apps." His companion pulled up a market tracker, her face paling as red numbers plummeted across the screen. Victoria clutched the table, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. "You think you can ruin me?" she said, her voice a desperate plea disguised as defiance. "This city is mine." But her words were dust, scattered by the storm Cassandra had unleashed. The grizzled investor stood, his chair scraping loudly, and pointed at Victoria. "You did this," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "You pushed her, and now we all pay." The crowd nodded, some openly glaring at Victoria, their allegiance shifting as swiftly as the market. Cassandra reached for her water glass, lifting it with a grace that silenced the room further. She took a slow sip, the act deliberate, a quiet assertion of control. Setting it down, she spoke again, her voice low but resonant. "You wanted to humiliate me," she said, each word a hammer, "but you've only humiliated yourself." The crowd exhaled, phones flashing to capture the moment, posts on X exploding. Cassandra Brooks just ended Langley Ventures, Cunard Novatech scandal. Victoria's face crumpled, her silver dress sagging as if it too knew defeat. The restaurant pulsed with a new rhythm, one dictated by the woman in the stained pink gown. The chandelier's glow crowned her, the murmurs now a chorus of awe. Victoria stood alone, her empire crumbling in real time, while Cassandra's presence filled every corner of the room. The next move was hers and the world was watching. The restaurant's air vibrated with a raw electric charge, as if the chandeliers above Le Ciel Étoilé were humming with the weight of what had just transpired. Cassandra Brooks sat at the center, her pastel pink gown a sodden emblem of triumph, its wine-stained tulle and floral accents gleaming like a warrior's crest. Her words, "You've only humiliated yourself," had sliced through the room, leaving Victoria Langley exposed, her silver silk dress clinging to her like a tattered flag. The crowd, once a fractured mosaic of loyalties, now orbited Cassandra, their phones no longer mocking, but documenting a legend in the making. The buzz of notifications filled the space. Gershak Novatech scandal, a wildfire on X, its flames licking at Victoria's empire. Victoria's face was a mask of panic, her blonde hair disheveled as she clutched the table's edge. "This isn't over," she shouted, her voice a jagged shard, sharp but brittle. "You think one text can ruin me? Langley Ventures is this city." Her words were a plea, not a proclamation, and the crowd met them with silence. Her allies, once quick with laughter, sat rigid, their eyes averted, phones buzzing with market alerts that painted a grim picture. A young coder at a side table whispered, "She's done," his voice carrying a finality that echoed across the room. His companion, a female developer, tweeted, "Cassandra Brooks didn't just win, she rewrote the board. A checkered Novatech scandal." Cassandra's thoughts were a calm sea after a storm. She's shouting into a void. "I've already spoken." Her posture remained regal, her hands resting lightly on the table, the wine's residue a badge of her resilience. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence was enough, a gravitational force that bent the room's light and will. Liam, the tech journalist, stood at the bar, his notebook a blur of ink as he scribbled. "She's a titan," he said to his editor, who nodded, eyes fixed on Cassandra. "And Victoria's a ghost." Nearby, the grizzled investor who had pulled his funds checked his phone, his face grim. "Langley's down 12% already," he muttered. "Brooks did that with one move." Victoria spun toward the crowd, her arms outstretched, her silver dress flashing desperately. "You know me," she cried, her voice cracking like thin ice. "You know my name, my power. She's nobody." But the room's gaze was on Cassandra, whose stained gown seemed to radiate authority. A female director in a sapphire gown leaned toward her husband, her voice low but firm. "She's not nobody, she's the future." Her husband nodded, his phone buzzing with a colleague's text. "Get out of Langley stock. Now." The hashtag NAR Novatech scandal surged, post-flooding X. "Victoria Langley's empire is dust. All hail Brooks." The crowd's shift was palpable, a tide turning against Victoria's sinking ship. An influencer in sequins, her live stream long since abandoned, stared at Cassandra with awe. "She's untouchable," she whispered to her tablemate, who nodded, posting, "Cassandra Brooks is rewriting power. Gershak Novatech scandal." The room's energy pulsed around the woman in the pink gown, her silence now a scepter, her presence a crown. Victoria's desperation grew, her heels clicking frantically as she paced. "You're all fools," she snapped, pointing at the crowd. "She can't touch me." But her eyes betrayed her, darting to Cassandra, searching for a weakness that didn't exist. Cassandra's fingers grazed her water glass, the movement deliberate, drawing every eye. "She's drowning in her own arrogance," she thought. "I'll let her sink." She lifted the glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with a soft clink that cut through Victoria's shouts. The gesture was simple, yet it silenced the room, a quiet command that made the chandelier's glow seem dim in comparison. Liam's pen paused, his breath catching. "That's power," he said, his editor grunting in agreement. "No performance needed." A tech founder at a nearby table whispered, "She's not just winning, She's redefining the game. Victoria's voice rose to a fever pitch. Her face flushed. I built this world, she screamed, slamming her fist on the table, rattling untouched plates. You can't erase me. But the crowd's eyes were on Cassandra, their phones capturing her serene defiance. A young app developer tweeted, Cassandra Brooks is a storm you don't see coming. Osh Novatech scandal. The grizzled investor stood, his chair scraping loudly. You erased yourself, he said to Victoria, his voice cold. Brooks just signed the warrant. The room nodded, some openly glaring at Victoria, their allegiance now wholly with the woman they'd underestimated. The chandeliers cast their light on Cassandra, her stained gown a testament to her victory. Victoria's shouts faded into a hollow echo, her silver dress a relic of a lost reign. The crowd's murmurs were now a chorus of awe, their phones a testament to a new order. Cassandra's next move would seal Victoria's fate, and every soul in Le Ciel Étoilé knew it. The world beyond was already watching, waiting for the woman in the pink gown to claim her throne. The restaurant's chandeliers cast a fractured glow, but their light seemed to bow to Cassandra Brooks, whose pastel pink gown, stained and sodden, gleamed like a battle standard in Le Ciel Étoilé. Her presence was a force, unyielding, commanding, as if the very air had sworn allegiance to her. Victoria Langley stood across the table, her silver silk dress a tattered veil over a crumbling facade, her face a mask of desperation etched with fury. The crowd, once divided, now unified in awe. Their phones no longer tools of mockery, but witnesses to a seismic shift. The buzz of Doused Novatech scandal roared on X, posts flooding the digital sphere. Cassandra Brooks is a queen. Langley's empire is ash. The room pulsed with the weight of a verdict delivered without a word. Victoria's voice, once sharp, now quivered like a frayed thread. You can't do this, she cried, her hands flailing, knocking a crystal glass to the marble floor. It shattered, the sound a brittle echo of her breaking reign. I am Langley Ventures. You're nothing without me. Her words were a drowning gasp, met with silence from a crowd that had abandoned her. A young coder, his phone dark, whispered to his companion, She's shouting at shadows. His friend, a female developer, nodded, her eyes on Cassandra. And Brooks is the light. A new tweet flashed across screens. Victoria's screaming, but Cassandra's winning. Novatech scandal. Cassandra's thoughts were a calm fortress. She's lost everything, and she doesn't even see it. Her posture remained regal, the wine's residue on her gown a map of her resilience, its floral accents shimmering like metals. She reached for a linen napkin, folding it with deliberate care, as if sealing a decree. The gesture drew every eye, a quiet act that spoke louder than Victoria's screams. Liam, the tech journalist, stood at the bar, his notebook trembling in his hands. She's rewriting history, he said to his editor, who nodded, his gaze fixed on Cassandra. And we're just spectators. A grizzled investor, his phone buzzing with market alerts, muttered, Langley's down 15%. Brooks did that without blinking. The crowd's allegiance was absolute, their murmurs a chorus of reverence. A female director, in a sapphire gown, leaned toward her husband, her voice soft but certain. She's not just surviving, she's reigning. Her husband nodded, his phone showing a plummeting stock chart. And Langley's paying the price. An influencer in sequins, her live stream long forgotten, stared at Cassandra, whispering, She's untouchable. Her tablemate posted on X. Cassandra Brooks didn't need to shout. Her silence broke an empire. Novatech scandal. The hashtag surged, millions of views cementing Cassandra's legend. Victoria staggered, her heels unsteady, her silver dress catching the light like a fading ember. You're all blind, she screamed, pointing at the crowd, her face blotchy with rage and fear. She's a fraud, a nobody. But her words were swallowed by the room's new rhythm, one dictated by the woman she had tried to destroy. A tech founder at a corner table stood, his chair scraping loudly. You're the fraud, he said, his voice cutting through the din. You thought you could break her, but you broke yourself. The crowd nodded, some openly glaring at Victoria, their phones now capturing her downfall. Cassandra's eyes, dark and unyielding, met Victoria's with a calm that was almost cruel in its certainty. She's not my enemy anymore, she thought. She's a relic. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low but resonant, slicing through the chaos. You thought you could erase me, she said, each word a stone dropped into a still pond. But you've only carved my name deeper. The room exhaled, a collective gasp, as phones flashed to capture the moment. Liam's pen flew across his notebook, his voice a whisper. That's the quote of the century. His editor nodded, murmuring, she's not just winning, she's redefining power. Victoria's knees buckled, her hands clutching the table for support. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her silver dress sagging like a defeated flag. The crowd's eyes were on Cassandra, whose stained gown now seemed a crown of scars, each wine streak a testament to her strength. A young app developer tweeted, Cassandra Brooks is a force of nature. Langley's finished. Novatech scandal. The grizzled investor turned to his partner, his voice grim. She didn't just end a deal, she ended a dynasty. His partner nodded, her phone buzzing with alerts. Langley ventures in freefall. The chandelier's light crowned Cassandra, her presence a beacon in the storm she had summoned. Victoria's screams faded into a pathetic whimper, her empire reduced to rubble in the span of minutes. The crowd's phones, once weapons of ridicule, now immortalize a new icon. Cassandra's gaze swept the room, unhurried, commanding, as if surveying her kingdom. The world beyond these walls was already shifting, and every soul in Le Ciel Étoilé knew the final act was hers to write. The air in Le Ciel Étoilé shimmered with a reverence that felt almost sacred, as if the chandeliers themselves bowed to the woman at the room's heart. Cassandra Brooks sat enthroned in her stained pastel pink gown, its sodden tulle and floral accents no longer marks of shame, but emblems of a victory etched in silence and steel. Victoria Langley stood defeated, her silver silk dress a crumpled relic, her face a tableau of shattered pride, eyes hollow as the crowd's gaze abandoned her entirely. The restaurant pulsed with a new rhythm, one dictated by the woman who had turned humiliation into dominion. Phones, once weapons of mockery, now captured a legend, their screens alight with Sharon Asher's Novatech scandal posts proclaiming Cassandra's triumph. She didn't just win, she redefined power. Victoria's final whimper lingered like a dying note, her hands trembling as she gripped the table's edge. You can't erase me, she whispered, but the words were dust, scattered by the weight of Cassandra's presence. The crowd, a constellation of wealth and ambition, stood united in awe, their murmurs a hymn to the woman in the pink gown. A young coder, his phone now pocketed, whispered to his companion, she's a myth in the making. His friend, a female developer, nodded, her eyes glistening. And we're witnessing it. A new tweet flashed across screens. Cassandra Brooks is the future, Langley's history, Novatech scandal. Cassandra's thoughts were a quiet beacon. They thought they could break me, but I've built something stronger. She reached for a small silver pen from her clutch, its surface catching the chandelier's light like a star. With deliberate grace, she placed it on the table, a simple act that felt like a coronation. The crowd leaned forward, their breath held, sensing the weight of the gesture. This is my mark, she thought, not the wine, not the insults. Her gaze swept the room, unhurried, commanding, each eye meeting hers with a mix of fear and reverence. Liam, the tech journalist, stood frozen at the bar, his notebook trembling in his hands. She's claiming the city, he said to his editor, who nodded, murmuring, and the world. The grizzled investor, his phone buzzing with market alerts, shook his head in awe. Langley's down 18%, he said to his partner, his voice low but caring. Brooks did that with a single text. His partner, a venture capitalist, stared at Cassandra, whispering, she didn't just end a deal, she ended an era. The female director in the sapphire gown clutched her husband's arm, her voice soft. She's not just a CEO, she's a movement. Her husband nodded, his phone showing a plummeting stock chart, the red lines a testament to Cassandra's power. On X, the hashtag Novatech scandal exploded, a post reading, Cassandra Brooks turned wine into a crown. There's game changer. Cassandra rose, her movement slow, deliberate, the stained gown rustling like a flag unfurled. The crowd stood instinctively, chairs scraping softly, their phones capturing her assent. She spoke, her voice low but resonant, cutting through the room like a blade through silk. "Power isn't in the wine you pour or the insults you scream," she said, each word a stone laid in a new foundation. "It's in the choices you make and the empires you topple." The room exhaled, a collective gasp, as phones flashed to immortalize her words. Liam's pen flew across his notebook, his voice a whisper. "That's her legacy." His editor nodded, eyes wide. "And it's just beginning." Victoria sank into her chair, her silver dress pooling around her like a fallen star. Her eyes, once sharp, were dull, her defeat absolute. The crowd ignored her, their focus wholly on Cassandra, whose stained gown now seemed a tapestry of triumph. An influencer in sequins, her livestream forgotten, tweeted, "Cassandra Brooks didn't break. She built a throne. Chakra Tech scandal." A tech founder at a corner table murmured, "She's rewritten the rules." His companion nodded, posting, "Langley's gone. Brooks is forever." The chandelier's light crowned Cassandra, her presence a beacon that outshone the room's opulence. Cassandra turned toward the grand glass doors, her steps measured, each one echoing like a heartbeat. The crowd parted, a sea yielding to its sovereign, their phones following her like stars trailing a comet. Just before exiting, she paused, her gaze sweeping the room one final time. She looked not at Victoria, now a shadow in her own story, but at the faces of those who had witnessed her rise. "Choices define us," she said, her voice clear, final. "Mine will echo." With that, she stepped through the doors, the stained pink gown trailing like a royal mantle. The room fell silent, the chandelier's glow dimming in her absence. Victoria sat alone, her empire in ruins, the crowd's whispers now a requiem for her reign. Outside, the city buzzed, news outlets already heralding Cassandra as a titan. Novatech scandal trended worldwide, her name etched into legend. She had entered as a guest, drenched in wine, but left as a queen, her legacy a fire that would burn long after the night ended. Cassandra Brooks walked out of Le Ciel Étoilé, her stained gown a testament to unbreakable resolve, leaving a city reshaped in her wake. Her story isn't just a moment, it's a challenge. What does power mean to you? Is it the wine poured in cruelty, or the silence that topples empires? Share your thoughts below. Did Cassandra's defiance spark something in you? Your voice matters in this tale of triumph. Thank you for joining this journey through a night that redefines strength, for standing with a woman who turned scars into a crown. Come back for more stories that ignite the soul, where courage writes the final word. Until then, keep chasing your own legacy.